National Guard in New Orleans. President Trump suggests that the Big Easy, not the Windy City, will be next to see the feds on the ground to stop violent crime. And what could possibly be worse than an evil dictator? Multiple that cannot die. Seem far-fetched? Not so fast. Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping are caught on a hot mic talking about living forever. Plus, why one California dad facing murder charges should have been behind bars, and thanks to Governor Gavin Newsom, not out on the streets when he allegedly murdered his 7-month-old son. Those stories and more today, Thursday, September 4th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. All eyes were on Chicago for the next chapter of the Trump administration's federal crime crackdown, but the Windy City may not be the location on deck. President Trump suggested Tuesday that a redder and more friendly state could soon be on the receiving end of National Guard troops.
We're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have New Orleans, which has a crime problem. We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks, easier than D.C.
As I said, sending the feds to NOLA would likely be met with much less pushback than a democratically governed state like Illinois. The idea of sending troops to Chicago has already been met with objections from both Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who are both Democrats. But you might be interested to learn that despite the objections of these officials, Chicago has tried this tactic before, and it seemed to work. During a single weekend in 2016, the city flooded 3 of its most dangerous areas with agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and U.S. Marshals, in addition to state and local police, with Democratic Mayor Rahm Emanuel giving that order. Crime dropped 40% that weekend, according to a local television news report at the time. And according to a prosecutor who helped plan the project, city leaders then refused to ask for more federal support to continue the project, fearing the optics. And now to tyranny run amok. Russian President Vladimir Putin was a guest of honor for China's Xi Jinping on Wednesday, and the two, with North Korean President Kim Jong-un in earshot, were caught on a hot mic having a pretty unsettling conversation. And I know, with this trio, you might expect all of their chats to register as unsettling, but this one was especially disturbing. It was about immortality. Putin's translator could be heard on a live feed saying, quote, "Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become, and even achieve immortality." Xi's translator then responds, quote, "Some predict that in this century, humans may live to 150 years old. So let that settle in." 3 of the world's most brutal dictators together, suggesting they could live forever by cycling in replacement parts. And the conversation's timing, interesting. It took place during a military parade marking the 80th anniversary of World War II. Now, President Trump was asked about the trio of tyrants hanging out together yesterday, and here's what he had to say.
It was very, very impressive, but I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or 2.
Now, to be clear, the president wasn't specifically answering a question there about the whole never dying part. He was likely talking about negotiations to end Russia's war with Ukraine and the possibility of slapping China with additional tariffs for trading with Russia, a move that could anger both of those leaders, who might be able to hold a grudge for eons to come. Now to a tragic update in the sad story of Emmanuel Harrow. Jake Harrow, the California dad accused of murdering his 7-month-old son and dumping him in a trash can, should have been behind bars. This monster of a man was previously convicted of maiming his 10-month-old daughter back in 2023, leaving this little girl bedridden for the rest of her life. It's the type of crime you'd expect someone to get sent to prison for, and for a long time. But the judge in that case let him off with probation instead. And making matters even worse, this case might not be all that out of the ordinary. State officials led by Governor Gavin Newsom have been pushing for years to empty California prisons. And as part of that effort, some violent offenders like Harrow were let back into the free world. The state's prisons are wildly overcrowded, housing about 120% of their capacity. Now, the moves to free up space were meant to focus on letting out non-violent offenders and sending some more serious criminals into local lockups rather than state prisons. But it would seem, at least in this case, it did not quite work out that way. Now to our big story. We may actually see an Epstein list. Several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims announced that they would be compiling their own client list based on people that they witnessed in the late billionaire's orbit, including people these victims accuse of abusing them. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene offered to read the names out on the floor of the House, which would protect the victims from being sued by the alleged abusers. The announcement came after the victims and their families met in private with the House Oversight Committee. And that's the meeting I told you about earlier this week. Behind closed doors, they shared harrowing stories of abuse, so intense that Congresswoman Nancy Mace stormed out of the meeting in tears, posting later on X that hearing the victims recount their experiences gave her a, quote, full-blown panic attack. And of course, I mentioned yesterday on the podcast that there was a huge document dump in the case, more than 30,000 pages. It included court filings and pictures and videos of evidence from Epstein's Florida mansion, flight logs, and plenty more. But at least from the point of view of congressional Democrats, it was nothing new. Now, 30,000+ documents sounds like a ton, but it wasn't everything. The Dems claim the release was an attempt to block their efforts to pass something called a discharge petition that would compel a more full release. That bipartisan effort is being led by California Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna and his Kentucky Republican colleague Thomas Massie. So what exactly is this discharge petition and what would it tell us? For that, I'm joined now by the Post Washington Bureau Chief Josh Christensen. So Josh, tell me more about the petition and this push to have more documents released. What is it? And more importantly, is it going to work?
The petition, according to many of its proponents, is the most comprehensive bill that will release investigative materials about Jeffrey Epstein, his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, anything related to the government's prosecution of him in the 2010s, and also any kind of FBI files stretching back to the early 2000s when this first became a thing. But it is under the Attorney General's discretion as to what to release. So the bill is something that's basically going to provide a lot of the unclassified material that investigators have sought but has not been able to get from the federal government.
Maybe I'm naive, but when I saw 30,000+ documents, I thought, okay, we're really going to learn something here. But Tuesday night's document dump seems like much ado about nothing. I mean, is that a fair assessment? Did we really learn anything new?
I mean, we learned some things about the raid that were unknown just based on some footage we got. Some of the photographs that Epstein kept in his residence. Nothing really new about the investigation or uncharged third parties, which was a big part of the, outcry in July that, the Justice Department wasn't naming names, that sort of thing. So it was about, more than 90% previously released information, either through the court cases or other means, such as the DOJ, releases that have come out. But we're thinking that if the Republicans and Democrats are able to join together on this discharge petition, at least according to one of the victims' lawyers, that lasts, 5 to 10% of the investigative materials about Epstein would actually be released. At least that's what they were promising people today.
I mean, a whole chunk of the documents were redacted to the hilt. It seemed like they were blacked out almost completely. I mean, we couldn't even really glean anything from those, right?
Yeah, a lot of things were redacted. Representative Massie was saying during a Republican conference meeting that so much was redacted, the flight logs, that it rendered it almost meaningless, and that was a big reason why he was pushing for the discharge petition. But we saw a lot of those redactions when the Justice Department made the earlier disclosures this year in what they called the Epstein Files Volume 1, and it's going to continue unless they have some sort of way to compel the Justice Department and some of these other agencies that were mentioned at the press conference that Massie was at with some of these victims. They were saying they're asking the CIA, they're asking several other agencies for any of investigative materials on Epstein. So it could be a pretty broad net they cast.
Is it me, or does it feel like every time it appears, like we're getting a couple steps down the road, a couple steps closer to new information. Whatever comes out makes me feel like we're exactly where we started.
Yeah, it's been a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but many people are still interested in pursuing this on both sides of the aisle, and this certainly won't go away in the near future.
Our Josh Christensen, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now to a mystery of bad manners on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, my stomping ground. And trust me, even if you've never been there, this is the type of crap that brings us all together. An unidentified dog mom has been refusing to pick up after her pooch after they do their business, and neighbors are over it. One witness even says that the offender recently left a steaming pile of poop in the middle of a crosswalk. Crosswalk I walk through. I could have stepped in that. Anyway, you're going to love this. It's vigilante justice, but petty. Someone snapped a spectacular photo of the doggy duty delinquent. She's screaming and flipping off the camera. And now that snap is plastered all over the neighborhood, shaming public enemy number 2. Neighbors who spoke to the post, as well as many on Reddit, applaud the petty posters, but admit that she is unlikely to change. And now to a felonious fast fashion fail. Retail company Shein has some folks hot under the cheaply made collar after it appeared to use a model that looked exactly like suspected United Healthcare CEO assassin Luigi Mangione to advertise a shirt. The image of the Mangione-esque model went viral after it was discovered on the website of the Chinese company before it was taken down, and the company promised to launch an investigation. But it seems it wasn't just the nearly sold-out shirt posting that used Mangione's likeness. Screen grabs from the website seemed to show a bunch of other products using the same exact model, prompting many to suspect they might have been AI generated. And I don't know exactly what Luigi is doing behind bars while he awaits 3 criminal trials, but I imagine he's not moonlighting as a catalog model. Now, if you're not aware of Shein, it's a very popular brand with Gen Z shoppers for offering dirt cheap trends that look a lot like dupes of higher-end items. And the company has been criticized for alleged forced labor in factories and for the destructive financial and environmental impact of fast fashion in general. And when the Post reached out for comment on the Luigi snaps, a company spokesperson said, quote, "The image in question was provided by a third-party vendor and was removed immediately upon discovery." And finally today, from our friends at Page 6, a cornucopia of Taylor Swift gossip. First, a source says Taylor and Travis are planning to tie the knot next summer in Rhode Island, and that, quote, she is in a hurry to have children. The Ocean State's Governor Dan McKee reposted the couple's engagement post and wrote, "Rhode Island has some of the best wedding venues in the world, just saying." But of course, Taylor doesn't need a wedding venue. She owns an enormous oceanfront mansion in the state, the one Swifties know as Holiday House. And in other Swiftie news, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was asked whether Ms. Swift would be gracing the stage of this season's Super Bowl halftime show, and the football boss said, maybe. That is a maybe. That is not a no. It's not a yes. It's a maybe. Now, he was asked about it yesterday on the Today Show, and after saying the NFL would, quote, always love to have Taylor play, Savannah Guthrie, our girl, pressed for more info about whether a Swift halftime extravaganza was actually in the works, and he said, quote, I can't tell you anything about that. It's a maybe. That could be a yes. Now, I will spare you all of the Easter eggs Swifties think she dropped during her recent podcast appearance, but if she did end up being the halftime performer, it should surprise absolutely no one. Guys, a wedding at Holiday House? How do I get on the guest list? And also the halftime show Be Still My Heart. But let's get serious. What we want to talk about is the pooper. Before you all head out and start your day, go to the New York Post, do it in print, go online, doesn't matter, so you can look at the petty pooper pictures. This woman's expression is too good, and the dog is even in the shot. It's excellent. You have to see it. And don't forget, like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. It helps people find us so I can tell them about poopers who don't pick up their stuff. It's a great story. See you tomorrow, guys.